When it comes to house flipping and real estate investing, there's a lot to keep track of. However, when you've done it for as long as I have, since 2008 now, there are some lessons and some benefits you get from learning those lessons so that you never make those same decisions again. So today I'm going to talk about the top 3 mistakes that I made when I was getting started flipping houses and why I will never make those same 3 mistakes ever again. So stay tuned. Hi there, my name is Amber Miller and I am a real estate flipper, designer, agent, renovator, educator. I run different types of coaching programs and have courses to help people learn and build and scale their own real estate investing or house flipping business. And I have been flipping houses since 2008 in my local market as well. And today I'm going to share 3 mistakes that I made during the early years of learning my business, and the 3 mistakes that I will absolutely never make again and why I won't make those again. So let's start with number 1. The first mistake that I made years ago when I was learning, and let's be clear before we get into the mistake part of it, I think that mistakes are actually incredibly valuable because there is absolutely no way you can learn how to move through it and past it if you don't ever have that circumstance come up against you, right? So I think there's so much value in having things happen that are not ideal so that you do learn to navigate those waters. But number 1, the thing that I will never do again is have a 50-50 partner. Now, early on in my flipping, I had a business partner and we were 50-50 partners. And for a few projects that actually went pretty well, but it wasn't too long after we started kind of trying to ramp up our business a little bit, where there just kind of started to be some very evident differences in philosophy when it came to business. So for my purposes, I wanted to take all of our profit that we were making on the flips and reinvest it so that we can continue to grow our business, get more buying power, have more liquidity, have more capital, not have to be using our personal loans and finances to finance our properties. However, my partner actually preferred to divvy everything up profit-wise and take everything out as soon as our projects were closed. So when one person thinks about that one way and the other person thinks about it differently, then obviously one person becomes more invested with their capital in the business. And that's what happened in our case. Another thing that showed up was one of the goals for the partner was to acquire as many rental properties for passive income or less involved income, I guess you could say. And I wanted to keep flipping. So those 2 fundamentally different types of strategies didn't really align together. And if one was purchasing properties for their own goals, then that was taking away our buying power as a partnership because we were tied with everything 50-50. So eventually, after a few months, we decided to take the remaining 2 properties and divide them between us. I took one, they took the other, and then we severed our partnership. And I haven't looked back since. And that was 12 years ago. So obviously it can work. However, I think the best way to do things, especially when you're getting started, is to kind of go on your own. If you need to have a partner, then absolutely do that, but make sure your expectations, responsibilities, what's going on in the business is very clear. Make sure you know who's making what decisions, make sure you know who's responsible for which tasks, because the last thing you want is for somebody to feel like they are putting more effort, more money, more attention into the business, but your profit is still being split 50-50. All right, number 2. The second thing that I will never do again, and mistake I will not make twice when it comes to flipping houses, is I will never hire a contractor who I don't check all of their references on. I did this one time and it ended up that they actually did check their references verbally with somebody, but it turned out that it was somebody that they had kind of set up to do that. So I will never do hiring of a contractor unless I'm able to check individually those references. And I need to make sure that it's not a situation that could be manipulated, but I actually am very, 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 very adamant, even to this day, about hiring contractors. Just a couple years ago, we had somebody reach out who called and said that they had gotten my contact information from somebody else who happens to be an electrician that we work with, and that they knew we were looking for a contractor. And so he wanted to meet with us on a job site. So I met with him and he gave me a bid, and his numbers were ridiculously low. They were like 50% lower than, like, they were half the price of the other contractor we had gotten numbers from. And the other contractor was somebody we'd worked with. And so I was immediately like, there's something not right. Like, nobody can be making money and running a profitable contracting business doing this type of work for this type of money. There's just no way. The numbers were just too off, right? So I asked him for references, and he didn't really send me any. He sent me pictures of a house that he had done, and I could see the address numbers. So I looked it up online, and I found that it had been a flip. So I reached out to the agent to find out if he had any knowledge of the project or knew who the owner had been when the flip had been done and this contractor had been hired. And oddly enough, when I got the agent on the phone, the very first thing he said to me was, "Did he actually give you my name and phone number?" So it didn't take much for me to realize that obviously things had not gone well. So it turns out the agent was actually the owner of the house, and he was the one who had hired the contractor. So I got to get enough information to know that it wasn't going to be a good fit. And so therefore we did not hire that contractor, obviously. So I will never, ever make the mistake of not talking to someone, at least one person, preferably two, who have either worked with that person or have had them do work for them, because otherwise you just don't have any idea or any expectation of what that will look like when you hire them for your project. Okay, number 3. Thinking that the only way to buy houses is with cash for flipping. I will never make that mistake again. I made that mistake for the first about 5 years of my flipping business, and it almost kept me from ever scaling. In fact, it did keep me from scaling my business. I had this belief early on, and I got the belief from somebody who was pretty experienced and had the same belief themselves, is that you never borrow money to flip houses. That it's a waste, right? You don't want to pay the interest, you don't want to pay the points. But here's the thing. If you don't ever borrow money and you have to turn down projects because your cash is tied up in other projects, some of which might be done and just waiting to close, then you never get to capitalize on those other opportunities and you have to pass everything by. So for example, it might cost you $15,000 to borrow the money to do a flip, right? But your profit will still be $35,000 if you do that flip. If you say no to the flip, you make nothing. So in certain circumstances, it does absolutely make sense to borrow money. And the idea that you only use one strategy to run a business isn't a good business strategy, no matter what type of business you're running. So make sure to keep those opportunities open for yourself. Make sure to know that in certain situations with certain projects, absolutely it can make sense to borrow money. And again, anytime you're making a profit and that's more than zero, then it might be a project worth looking at. So don't write them off just because you might need a loan instead of cash. All right, I hope these 3 mistakes that I made once and will never make again are helpful for you. Make sure you like this video, check out the other videos I've got available on the channel, and subscribe so that you get notified every week when there's a new video available. Until next time, bye for now.